Yep, the clock is not moving. Oh, now it's moving. And now here's Geno Smith on a 3rd and 8. Here is the pass, and that is caught by DK Metcalf.
I want to show you what we got here with Ian Rappaport.
It is.
The
Well done.
Seahawks
How you doing, sir?
have
We
their
actually do
new
this.
QB.
Yeah.
Well, so much has happened in the past week for Seattle Seahawks and Seattle Seahawks fans. And boy, it is a lot to digest, from DK Metcalf wanting a trade, then the Seahawks traded away Geno Smith, then they trade away DK Metcalf, and now they just signed Sam Darnold. And before we get all into this, give me a few seconds to breathe after a word from our sponsor. SeatGeek is a mobile ticketing app for sporting events, concerts, and other events. They make the buying experience easier by the app ranking each ticket from 0 to 10 to see if you are getting a good deal, and you can see exactly where you are sitting. I regularly use that app, and I have had nothing but a fantastic experience with SeatGeek. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get $20 off of your first purchase. Link to the code, app, and website will be in the description, so take advantage, and thank you. Now I'm wondering what we should prioritize first. I mean, let's give like a quick summary that the Seahawks traded away Geno Smith and they got a 3rd round pick out of it. And then actually I was okay with doing that because the Seahawks got as much value as they could out of Geno, considering that when he first joined the Seahawks, he was just a backup quarterback to Russell Wilson, and he was not even expected to have some kind of semi-success. So good thing that the Seahawks did cash out of with a 3rd round pick, despite the fact that the Seahawks actually offered him a pretty generous offer of around $45 million, but it turned out Geno Smith wanted a little bit more, so the Seahawks just weren't having it anymore, knowing that the Seahawks were one of the bottom teams in cap space, and then the Seahawks traded him. And we were thinking, well, maybe now the Seahawks are going to get a new quarterback. Were they going to get Aaron Rodgers, bring back Russell Wilson for the nostalgia, Sam Darnold, maybe Gardner Minshew? And then the next day or 2 days later, the Seahawks traded away DK Metcalf, and this one was for a 2nd round pick, which wasn't too upset about because I really wanted that 1st round pick because we've seen teams give away non-quality receivers for 1st round picks out of desperations from that team, including the 2006 Seahawks, when they traded a 1st round pick to get Deion Branch out of the Patriots, and then Branch didn't really do much at all. And then with DK Metcalf, a 2nd round pick, which he was around a late 1st round pick, mid to late 1st round pick anyway. So I would have taken the 2nd round pick anyway, just considering the fact that he is kind of a hothead. He's like a feast or famine kind of receiver, and both of us have seen it through our fantasy football teams where there's games where DK does really well, and there's games where it's like, where is DK? Like, where is he at all? And then we were thinking, okay, maybe the Seahawks are just milking it. Maybe they're just planning for the future for the draft to get a new quarterback, including my delusional self wanting Arch Manning. But of course, everyone's like, well, you don't know if Arch Manning's going to work out necessarily. So that doesn't, well, we don't think, if that's going to happen. And then just this morning, or shall I say early afternoon, the Seahawks signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year, $100 million contract with around $50 million guaranteed. Now, Epic Seat Films, I've said so much. What are your thoughts on the Geno trade, DK trade, and now the Sam Darnold signing?
Yes. The only other thing you forgot was you didn't talk about us letting go of Tyler Lockett. That started off.
Yes, Tyler Lockett. And Tyler Lockett, we appreciate your services in Seattle. You put in 10 years with the Seahawks of dedication, hard work, and intelligence of not taking tackles. You just slide.
Yes. And so for me, I think what's happening here and stuff like that is that the Seahawks realized they were in a situation where people wanted more money than they were willing to give up. And so because of that, they decided to retool, not basically rebuild. And that's what I think they're doing right now, is a retool, not a rebuild.
Now, what are your thoughts on Sam Darnold? Because I'll go over my thoughts on Sam Darnold once you express your thoughts on Sam Darnold.
My thoughts right now are based on the fact of how much we're paying him. Because I thought he was going to go for, and everybody kept saying he was going to go for $40 million a year. We got him for 100.5 million, and we got him for 55 guaranteed. I'm like, that's actually pretty good for 3 years because that's like a Baker Mayfield style deal. Compared to all these other top quarterbacks, if he actually overperforms what his value, what he got in the market, what we gave him, then we are actually looking really good compared to other teams who spent 55 million on a quarterback per year. So I think that's where I'm really happy about, is that we didn't overpay for him. And so for me, I think it's a good, it's kind of like some people say it's almost an upgrade because the fact that he's 5 years younger.
Well, you're not completely wrong about that it is a potentially team-friendly contract. And I have been looking at the numbers for Sam Darnold, and we can all see that he struggled his time with the Jets, but we know what the Jets are. Jets are an absolutely just disaster of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Carolina Panthers, where they were in a huge transition period, and now they're seeing if what's his name?
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young is working out, who admittedly I was hoping the Seahawks would be in the position to draft him, but of course Geno did not let that happen, and so far it hasn't worked. And then he went with as a backup quarterback in 2023 with the San Francisco 49ers behind Brock Purdy. And now this season, or the 2024 season, he had a career year. Here's his yardage. He had a 4,319 yards, 66% completion, and his quarterback rating was, if I can even find it, I know I can't really find it at all because stats are just a pain to look at, but he was definitely one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. But what must I remind about what Sam Darnold actually had? He had the 9th best offensive line. Their grade was about an 82.1, a B minus. So they were top 10 in offensive line compared to what the Seahawks have. They have an F rating, 57.7, 30th in the league in offensive line. So one of the first things, if they are going to make this work, they have to find an offensive line core that can actually complement Sam Darnold. Otherwise, you're going to see the same exact thing where Geno Smith was basically, in some cases, running for his life or just trying to get off of a quick silver bullet pass. And he also had, you have to admit, he did have a couple good, solid weapons, or if not a few. He had Aaron Jones as his running back, one of the premier running backs in the league. Then you had Justin Jefferson, arguably one of the best receivers in the NFL, unless your name is Jamar Chase or anybody else. And then you had TJ Hawkinson. Now, he was out for about half the season, but he was still a huge factor for that team. Yeah. And what the Seahawks have now, they have arguably the second to third worst offensive line in the NFL as it stands today. Now, things can change because we're still in free agency. Seahawks still have cap space available, and they have plenty of draft picks, which we'll go over real soon. And your only receiver is Jackson Smith and Jigba right now, and your tight end is subpar to maybe average at best, and maybe Jake Bobo, but he seems to be more of a third down kind of receiver, or like maybe a 2 receiver at best. But I don't see Jackson Smith and Jigba as a number 1 receiver quite yet, considering that he does drop passes a lot. Now, he has great speed, he is athletic, but I don't think he's number 1 receiver, which is why I'm a little bit confused about these moves on why did they, if they were going to get Sam Darnold, then why not keep DK Metcalf and see if that makes him happy for a year? And if it doesn't, then maybe trade him during the middle of the season, and if it doesn't work out, or try to see if you can negotiate with him to get an extension, see if you can at least have that conversation. Now, if the Seahawks signed Sam Darnold before the trading of DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf was like, no, I still want out, then it's fine. But I think maybe they could have swapped the orders a bit on what kind of moves that they made.
So yeah, and for me, I think I like the direction they're going in and stuff like that, because one of the things like people talk about is about money spent and how we're spending our money wisely on stuff. Our defense keeps improving. Our defense last year was top 15, maybe top 12. And if our defense even improves more, that's a top 10 defense that we will have next year. Now, all like you talked about before, it's like, yes, our offensive line is our weakest part. Our receivers, okay, hey, we have Noah Fant, we have Jackson Smith, and we also have the person Jake Bobo. That's a good core. If we can add another decent or great receiver with that core, that should be pretty good there. Then plus our running backs, if our running backs could stay a little bit healthier, we might actually have a run for this to win our division. Our division isn't the strongest division, and the competition we're playing next year is both South divisions. So if we can kind of like put some pieces around there and build up our kind of what we already have, our missing pieces, which are offensive line and maybe a receiver here, all of a sudden, watch, we are still in the conversation. We are still potentially a 9 to 13 win team again next year.
That's a pretty bold statement. And what I'm also really concerned about, not only with our offensive line and our wide receiving core, which will need a huge tune-up, but what about our run game? Because the running game for the Seahawks was 17th, where you had Kenneth Walker. He was pretty much injured for half the season. And Zach Charbonnet, as much as I like his potential of that he could be a bruiser running back, he just didn't really show, in my opinion, enough to convince me that he's a number one running back. So maybe in the draft, the Seahawks should look into somewhere where they can see if they can find someone in the running back department, and trying to think of other things to say. And yeah, you were right about the Seahawks defense, that they're 14th, and you would hope that it gets better with the core of Jaron Reed and Witherspoon. But they've got to do more, like especially for this offense. They've really got to make sure that they can get that running game going, because their offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, and he could be a factor, if not he is the factor on why the Seahawks got Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold, he was actually under Clint Kubiak as one of the offensive coordinators for the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah. And let me check really quick if he was actually
he was a passing coach.
He was a passing coach, so not the offensive coordinator, but he was the quarterback's coach. Now, he was passing game coordinator, and now they got promoted to offensive coordinator, where he was with the Saints. And I also want to see what the offense was for the Saints last season. And if you can give me some thoughts too.
Yeah, so the Saints offense, the first two games, they were really good offense. They were one of the highest scoring offenses in the game. Then what happened? Derek Carr went down and got injured. And then he had to basically use backup quarterbacks and younger quarterbacks to replace him. And he still was able to survive that situation, but wasn't great because of the fact they were so inexperienced, the other two players. And so if Derek Carr would have stayed healthy, they might have had a way better team throughout the whole year, because they were scoring like 40 points a game or something like that with the first two games.
Yeah, so let me take a look at that and see if that is actually correct. So we've got the Saints of 2024. Now I'm going to the Saints statistic right now. And yeah, the first two games, they did score over 40 points. And after that, like you said, Derek Carr was injured. He was 5-5, so at least they were decent and somewhere in the hunt, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And you would think that with Clint Kubiak, if he has maybe a much more competent organization to work with, which they're going to have to do, I think they have to get a running back, they have to get a wide receiver, and they have to just build up on that offensive line, because when you're 30th in the league in offensive line, Sam Darnold is going absolutely nowhere with this team. So unless you can improve that and make it the mid-tier offensive line, they got to do that, or else Sam Darnold's going to be in big trouble. So that's what they're going to have to look at, especially running back, because Kenneth Walker looks like he just can't stay healthy. I just don't think that he has the longevity to really just hold out to like really last throughout an entire season. Zach Charbonnet, he seems more to be a number 2 running back. I just don't see him as like a number 1 running back. So Seahawks still have plenty of work to do in this free agency.
I think with the whole fact of the running back situation, I think last year they said that we were a very pass-heavy team. We passed most of the time. And because we were one of the most pass-heavy teams, we didn't get to see our running backs utilized that much to see their potential. Yes, like Kenneth Walker was injured for part of the season and stuff like that. And so if we utilize them more and we can keep them in situations where they don't get injured as much, maybe that will change the dynamic of our team, because, hey, if Sam Darnold just passes the ball off to one of our running backs and they do stay healthy this year, it happens to be one of those like amazing seasons, then hey, because our running backs aren't bad. Like, they're at least like mid-tier to like maybe just under top tier running backs, I think. I don't think they're one of the worst running back cores we see in the actual like game. I think they actually have a good chance right there to actually do something with that piece there. And like we said, we know our biggest problem is our offensive line. If we want to survive this, I say go all in on finding offensive linemen right now, and that's your next goal. Because I think they were talking about how Mike Macdonald's philosophy is. He said his philosophy is work from the inside out, build the inside, and then work on building the outsides later on. So if that's true, we did defense last year. Maybe we'll focus more on the offensive line this year.
Which they're going to have to do for sure. And the other thing I've noticed about last year's offense was Ryan Grubb was the offensive coordinator, former offensive coordinator of the Washington Huskies. Yes, of course, we were going to expect a huge pass-heavy offense, but I never trusted them because I know this is in my personal bias.
Yeah.
Never trust a Husky. I just don't trust Huskies. I never do. They have never been, I've never seen them be successful. Like, yeah, I can't even think of a Husky, unless you can name one for me that has actually shown actual success in the NFL in the coaching area. Now, there's players that have been successful, sure.
Yes.
But what about the coaching? Because I didn't think Ryan Grubb was the right guy for this offense, hence why it really reflected on Geno Smith. Now, granted, I didn't like Geno Smith that much, but Ryan Grubb didn't really help the cause either.
I think one of the things like we talked about before was that if so Ryan Grubb, I thought, was not a bad choice at the beginning because I liked how pass heavy he was. And for Geno has a big arm and can pass the ball. The problem was, like we said before, was our offensive line. If he had a better offensive line, maybe he wouldn't have struggled as much and threw as many red zone interceptions as we saw during that season. So I think it was a combination of the fact that our offensive line kind of failed Geno.
They did. It is true. But it's something, I mean, either way, they have to fix that anyway.
Yeah.
But you also, even good offensive line or not, you should still be able to run an effective offensive scheme to make it work anyway, because sometimes you can make up for it. And it's not like all the best quarterbacks, it's not like they played with any of the best offensive lines either. We've seen Tom Brady, he's played with some of the worst offensive line before. I mean, someone on the offensive line coach got fired at one point when they lost to Denver in the 2015-16 season. So offensive line doesn't guarantee everything, but yes, it does help a lot, which is why it worked with Sam Darnold, at least for his contract year, which is why the other concern I have is, was Sam Darnold, with his last year of his contract, did he overachieve just to get that big payday? And if he does get, and since he does get the pay, is he going to still live up to that contract? Or is he just going to be the standard Sam Darnold that we know? But granted to Sam Darnold, he has played with some of the worst franchises in NFL history. The Jets, like, that's where players go to die. We saw Geno failed there. Not that I would make that excuse for Geno, but we saw Sam Darnold, he failed.
Aaron Rodgers.
And Brett Favre. Like, players' careers in the Jets go to die. And then you had the Panthers, who had just gotten rid of Cam Newton. That also didn't work out either for Sam Darnold. Like, it just didn't seem right for him. Like, Baker Mayfield couldn't even work out with Carolina. And Cam Newton's second time also couldn't work out. So hopefully with a much more functional organization, that will work out. But you got to get that offensive line. If you don't get the offensive line, everything else doesn't matter. But it does seem like Clint Kubiak is going to be more of a running approach and try to emphasize more on defense, because maybe they think that the defense is going to be the way to go, because after all, defense wins championships. And that was some of the things that Seahawks have been plaguing for years, is they haven't exactly had an elite defense since around 2016. So it's kind of been that long. And we saw some pretty bad defense on this Seahawks team. But with the progress they made last season, hopefully they will keep that going into next season. So that way Sam Darnold doesn't have to play clutch ball every time like Geno Smith had to.
I think the other thing too is that like we starting to see where players, once one player gets a certain type of contract, we see where other players get a certain type of contract. And it made sense that the contract that he got was similar to like a Baker Mayfield style contract. It made a lot of sense. And I think for a team like us, who isn't a team that's willing to spend a buttload of money, this is actually a pretty good situation, because if you look at the draft, everybody says this is a weak quarterback draft. It's literally weak. And so it's like, if this is such a weak draft that everybody's saying, there might be at most 3 quarterbacks that are actually one of those 3 quarterbacks could be the next future like greatness. I don't, you're only talking about 1 out of 3 quarterbacks. Is there any more in there that you would actually even put in a conversation? Maybe 4 at most. And that's the problem with this whole draft, is that there's not really enough quarterbacks here, and this wasn't the year to do it. So even if he doesn't work out, we could just go the following year and get a quarterback, or another year get a quarterback. So it's like, what the Seahawks are thinking right now is like, hey, for a transition guy who doesn't cost us a lot, like a whole bunch of money, versus like some other players, and it's like, do we want someone old like Russell or like Aaron, who's going to be old? We can roll the dice on a Sam Darnold. It makes a lot of sense, because the only other guy to roll the dice on, is if he was available, would have been like a guy like a Justin Fields, and he was not available.
With the Jets signed him, which I was okay not getting Justin Fields, because I just didn't think he was that good, and I didn't think it was warranted to give him he was on the Bears excuse. And he was on the Steelers, and he had a much more competent team, and it still didn't work out, even going 4-2, because Steelers, they kind of had some like very low scoring games, but then when Russell took over, the team got a little bit more stabilized. And speak of the draft, let's go into the draft, which the Seahawks are going into for 2025, and maybe I should do a live coverage of that NFL draft. I don't know yet. I'm thinking about it, at least for the first round, but not sure yet.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what we got. They have a first round pick that is number 18. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they necessarily have to trade up, unless they're going to trade up for like any of those quarterbacks. Then you got 2 second-round picks 50 and 52. Then you got 2 third-round picks, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, 2 6th-round picks, and 2 7th-round picks. So expectedly, this will be a much younger Seahawks team, and hopefully they can actually emphasize more on that offensive line. And I did take a look at quarterbacks for the draft. The best quarterback is Cam Ward. He is the 8th projected prospect. Then you got Shedeur Sanders. He is also projected to be the 24th pick. And then you got Jackson Dart is the other rising popular quarterback prospect. He did well in his combine. Got Quinn Ewers, but then everything else after that, they don't really stand out very well. But those are the first 4. And Epic Sea Films, you can say yes or no. I'm not going to be offended either way. But do you have an idea of how you feel about the quarterbacks, those first 4 quarterbacks?
So with those first 4 quarterbacks, I think I have different opinions depending on where they are. I feel like the one's going to be gone. The Cam Ward's going to be gone. And so I feel like if we do get a quarterback, it's like, do you really want the Sanders show? Because it would bring a lot of attention to us, but I don't think he would be the best choice for the future of making us a great team. We might be a good team, maybe, but will we be like Super Bowl caliber team? No, but we'll get a lot of news buzz around us for having Shedeur Sanders. And then Quentin Ewers, I'm like, I don't know. I think I'd rather go with what everybody's talking about. Is I think the best option for us, if we do choose a quarterback, would be Jackson Dart. But the problem is like, we already have a backup young quarterback that we could just keep training. Maybe he will surprise us someday with Sam Howell.
Not Sam Howell. Do not say Sam Howell ever again on this show. There's rumors that he's on a soda diet, that he literally drinks soda a ton. So no, thank you. No Sam Darnold. I think the Seahawks should draft a quarterback, or at least get a cheap backup quarterback that would be better than Sam Darnold, or better yet, tank for the number 1 pick next year. Just kidding. I gotta stop saying that. I feel like every time I talk about tanking for the first pick, I should probably have a swear jar about it and owe you some money. But with the Seahawks first round pick, they are projected to be getting. They could be in line to get an offensive lineman from Ohio State. That's Josh Simmons. He's around that ranking.
Yeah.
And with the multiple second round picks that the Seahawks have, maybe they can go for that Jackson Dart, but some say that he may move up in rankings more. I think maybe at best he'll move up to like the mid first round pick, and maybe the Seahawks will draft him and see if he can learn from a Sam Darnold or just anything else. But this draft will be interesting, and I really do think it's going to be worth doing a live show about, because there's going to be a lot of let's say, it's going to be a lot to go over. Like, what are the Seahawks going to do with their needs? Who are they going to get? And like, this is probably the first draft to like actually watch since like 2010s, 2011s, and 2012s. Because remember those 3 drafts?
Yeah.
Those were some of the most impactful drafts the Seahawks had, and they nailed every single pick. Remember in 2010, they got Earl Thomas in that draft, Russell Okung. I think they drafted Cam Chancellor around that as well. 2011 was Richard Sherman. I think, Richard Sherman, like Byron Maxwell, if I can still remember. 2012 was probably their biggest one. It was Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson. Those were huge drafts that the Seahawks nailed. And now we're going into 2025 where a lot is going to be at stake. Like, what are they going to do? And are they going to trade down for depth in their draft picks, which John Schneider has done before? He has been known to trade down his picks. And he usually trades down his first round picks a lot. So something to look forward to in the draft. And Epic C Films, like, what do you see in free agency and the future draft for this season?
So one of the interesting questions is Tyler Lockett still interested in wanting to play football? If Tyler Lockett is, they say there's 2 options for where he would end up. Would he re-sign with the Seahawks, or would he go to the Raiders? And if he signed with the Seahawks, I don't think we need to get a wide receiver in the first round. Not this year.
I still do, because Lockett is up there in age and he wasn't utilized as much as he was in the previous years. So I think the Tyler Lockett era is actually over, unfortunately.
But here's the thing for me. It's like, I think if we get Tyler Lockett or someone like a good free agent, like a wide receiver, I think like our biggest need, and I think that what we should focus on, is getting a first round pick as an offensive lineman. We already have our left tackle. Maybe get a right tackle to go with our left tackle. We already have like Abe Lucas, if he could stay healthy. And then, maybe I think that would be a better option for us, is just a really good offensive lineman at that pick. And so I think that's just my opinion, because I feel like we could fill in those other pieces, because I feel like if Tyler Lockett is really that loyal, he might want to come back and maybe play one more season after all the drama that's happened, because we thought that we need to get rid of him to save cap space. Now that our other pieces are gone, he might want to come back.
It's very unclear, but I think my prediction is I think he's just going to retire, because
You think so?
I actually got to know Tyler Lockett a little bit because I work in the real estate industry, and he's actually a real estate agent. So I think he's getting more into that, and he admitted that he's getting a license in Texas. So I think personally, I really think he's moving on. I think he's going to retire. I think he really wants to grow his real estate business. So I can't really blame him. And very smart of Tyler Lockett getting into that business where he still wants to find ways to make money for the future. And why not? He has a very respectable name. He was a very beloved wide receiver of the Seahawks. And I think he was arguably one of the greatest receivers in Seahawks history. I think he's up there with Steve Largent. Now, Steve Largent obviously is the best wide receiver in Seahawks history, but I think Tyler Lockett should be considered a top 3. So unfortunately, I think his career is done, unless the only thing I see him doing is going to the Raiders. But would he really want to do that? I don't know. I don't know Tyler Lockett that much, with the exceptions of like a conversation with him when I met him at an open house. But that's about it. So I don't see it happening. But Tyler Lockett, I do want to say thank you. I still am going to thank you for all your hard work that you put into Seattle. Like, he did a lot for this team, from kick returning to being a wide receiver with longevity.
Well, my whole thing is thinking about like, is there things we're not thinking about that would be a wild pick for them, but it would actually be a smart move, Because I'm thinking to myself, like, we always talk about, okay, you think we need a wide receiver or a running back? I don't think we really need a wide receiver or running back as much as people think we need. But I also, because I'm really big on the offensive line right now, but I think what would be interesting, like, would they go crazy on us and be like, hey, I'm gonna go grab a safety in the first round, like, or something like that. Like, how would you feel about that? Them going get a defensive player in the first round.
Nothing would surprise me. And I'm looking at top 8, not agents. Why did I say agents?
Yeah.
I was talking about real estate. But Amari Cooper right now is the best receiver available. But he's at 30 years old, and I don't think he really has that kind of impact. There's Stephon Diggs, but he's up there in age. Darius Slayton, Keenan Allen, but these are like old guys. DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, he's pretty much out there in age. So I don't think the Seahawks are going to go for anything in that. I think they would sign maybe any of those little guys, but it seems that they're not going to be too much focused on having a huge wideout, which is why I'm really going to miss DK Metcalf. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think I took him for granted after all of our interactions?
So with some of the interactions, it's like I knew you liked him, and even me, it's like I think the problem was that we didn't appreciate DK Metcalf that as much as we should because of the fact that we didn't get to see how great he was. Because like some people were saying, the Seahawks. Did you think the Seahawks underutilized him?
Really depends, but I think the bigger issue was he just happened to. He's a hothead. Like, yes. He really is. Like, he gets fired up. There was a time in 2023 against San Francisco where he actually got kicked out of the game because he got into a fight. Yeah. But it was mostly the 49ers instigating it. But that was the point. The one who responds, who gets in trouble more? The one who responds or the one who instigates? Who gets in most trouble?
The person who always retaliates back on the second person.
Yeah, the second person. That's how, I don't know why. It just happens to be, I guess the reaction just happens to be louder than the instigator, because I think the instigators are usually the smart ones because they're usually quiet about it, which they did. But I'm going to definitely miss the talent, but I'm looking to see what they could get at wide receiver in the draft, and they're not really in line to really get anyone at all. They're all going to be gone by then, and they're not going to be any big guys for wide receivers. They're all small guys. But maybe size matters not by what Master Yoda would say, but it seems that with Clint Kubiak, they're probably going to go more into a more running game and a more short passes kind of approach. That's probably what they're going to do because they probably want to focus on that defense and that running back. But before we go, and I know I'm going a little bit snappy on this, do you think John Schneider is on the hot seat? Because it's been a while since we've actually seen massive success under John Schneider, especially even after that 2012 draft where he didn't really nail much drafts. Like, there's not really anything notable. Like, there was Frank Clark and Tyler Lockett in 2015. And then everything else after that was kind of just not memorable at all. There was DK Metcalf in 2019. But aside from that, there was not really much draft picks or draft classes that actually well stood out. So do you think that Schneider's on the hot seat for this season? Like, if it doesn't work out for him, do you think the Seahawks give him the axe?
I think John Schneider is the next person to get the axe if we're going to take big cuts from things. Because you think about it, everything he's built up to this time, where he had Pete Carroll, that was the first thing gone. He had Russell, Pete Carroll, he had all these other guys. He's had so many excuses put on that were taken away from him already that the only thing left is why would they side him over Mike Macdonald? You know what I mean? So I feel like Mike Macdonald's so new to the team that they would rather go with Mike Macdonald's, future planning, and Mike Macdonald is so much younger that we would go with him over a John Schneider. So I feel like John Schneider is on his last leg. If he doesn't get it right this season, would they give him another attempt to say, hey, draft a free agent and draft a rookie quarterback and go with it? Would they give him that one last attempt like you want? I don't know, because if Sam Darnold doesn't work out and we should end up being a 3-win team, would they give it to him?
No. I think they'll be done. I actually believe that if the Seahawks don't make the playoffs, because assuming that they're on reload mode, not rebuilding mode, if they don't make the playoffs, I think John Schneider's done. If they make the playoffs, then he'll stay. But if they don't make it, or if it's like embarrassing, or even if I think even with a above 500 record, and they miss the playoffs like 1 or 2 games like they've been doing the last 2 seasons, I still think he's gone. But don't get me wrong. Schneider did well with the Seahawks. I mean, he did help build the Super Bowl winning Seahawks team. But let's also not forget that he also had some of the best scouts to work with, and they all moved on from John Schneider, because when you win the Super Bowl, the one thing you are losing is you're losing your depth in your organization, because other guys that are working under John Schneider, they want to get promoted and have bigger roles. And John Schneider has lost those people, and some of those people were very prominent in those drafting. And John Schneider I don't think he should get credit for everything, but yes, he should get credit for being a part of it, leading the show, delegating well. But I think he's starting to show that maybe he has missed quite a bit of shots in the draft. So I think that this season could be it for him. Like, this draft is going to be huge. This free agency is already big for him. So he's got to step up and build, hopefully, at least going back to the playoffs kind of team. Like, I don't expect the Super Bowl anytime soon yet, but at least something where we can say progress.
And I think that's where we're at right now, is that he realizes that he has to retool, not rebuild. You know, he has to do it now, because if he can't tank. He knows that I think he knows he's on the hot seat, and he knows he can't tank. If his team tanks this year, then he's basically gone. So like you always talk about, you want that thing. That wouldn't be, we couldn't do that unless we got a new GM in there. So you kind of want him, and that's the thing, is like, you know, and so John Schneider is not going to be around much longer unless this season goes well. And like, the thing about it is, it was a fluke last year that we won 10 games and didn't make the playoffs. That was kind of a little bit upsetting, you know, how it fell, but it was still a really good effort by a first-year head coach. I think Mike Macdonald did a great job. I think that was a great move and stuff like that, you know. So at the end of the day, I'm thinking some of the moves we're doing are great moves. It's just, it takes time to get places and stuff like that. And I don't believe that you always need to go bad before you become good, before you become great. I think you can be good, and then become great again.
Well, we will have to see. And I did look up the NFL draft, and it's going to be on April 24th, 2025. And I am considering to at least cover the first round, because I think it's going to be a very interesting draft for the Seahawks. And crazy to think that these crazy moves are the reason why I'm starting to get at least put out a video for the Seahawks, because it is garnering demand. But we'll see. I'll let you guys all know if we do the NFL draft coverage. And if we do, it'd be a lot of fun to go over. We can talk about everything, but I would definitely have to get ready and do a lot of research before I even get into that. And I expect you to do that as well. But that will do it. Everyone, thank you very much for watching this video, especially considering that the Seahawks just made crazy amount of moves throughout the past week. And hopefully the Seahawks can reload correctly so they can return to the playoffs for next season. And Epic C Films, as usual, thanks for dealing with all my shenanigans. Thanks for dealing with the fact that I want to tank for Arch Manning, even though that's very delusional to say. Thanks for dealing with all of it. And despite how much we think differently on the Seahawks, we still do a show together and we still make it work.
And that's the thing that's great about this, is that everybody has their own opinions on which direction they should go to do things. And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, like my philosophy is just, I always have hope, because whoever comes here, I want them to succeed, you know. And everybody has their ways of thinking about things to where we're going to get to success. Because at the end of the day, we want to see success, and we want them to win championships. And that's good. And you know, it takes time. You know, you can't just like flick a switch and the next day you're a championship winner.
Unless you're the Washington Commanders, who are pretty close to it. But Epic C Films, do you have any final advice for people out there in the world watching my video?
Yes, I would say to people, just, you know, stay positive, you know, don't drink, you know, and remember, don't quit your day job, because, you know, and remember, life is short, so live it.